the headlines. We have a special report from the front line inside Kharkiv that's under constant Russian bombardment.
They're up against here. This is daily, but the steadfastness of these men has been felt not just in Kharkiv, but around the world. They've had 4 weeks of this, and still they remain. The Russians haven't been able to break their lines.
As soldiers battle for peace in Ukraine, this is their message to Russian forces.
You stay here forever, in the ground, or you go back home and stop killing children and destroying homes and families.
Western leaders promised to increase military aid to Ukraine as President Biden says Russia's invasion has given the NATO alliance unprecedented unity.
NATO has never been more united than it is today. Putin is getting exactly the opposite what he intended to have as a consequence of going into Ukraine.
Outside the capital Kyiv, Ukrainian forces say they're pushing Russia's army back in a series of counter-offensives. In protests and prayers, we meet the Russians desperately seeking an end to the war.
As Russia faces continuing resistance in Ukraine, President Biden warns Moscow that any use of chemical weapons would trigger a response in kind by NATO.
Ahead of a visit to Poland today, he also announces $1 billion in humanitarian aid for those caught up in the conflict.
The US President Joe Biden has warned that any use of chemical weapons in Ukraine by Vladimir Putin would trigger a response from NATO.
It comes as the alliance approves a major increase of its forces in Eastern Europe following an emergency meeting in Brussels yesterday. Graham Satchell has the very latest.
An explosion in the occupied southern port of Berdyansk. Plumes of black smoke seen for miles around. The Ukrainians say they destroyed a Russian warship, the Orsk. This was it 3 days ago. It's been playing a key role in boosting Russian supply lines, carrying troops and hardware. Its destruction more evidence of a fight back at sea and on land. There isn't much left of Makariv, a town to the northwest of the capital Kyiv. For weeks and weeks, the Russians have shelled it relentlessly. But in a fierce battle, Ukrainian forces have regained the town, pushing Russian soldiers back. Makariv was a key target for Russia. The road from here runs straight to the capital. So a question, is Ukraine turning the tide in this war?
I think Ukraine can certainly win. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think that the situation for the Ukrainians is grim, miserable. I don't think we've seen anything like it for 80 years in Europe, and what Putin is doing is unconscionable.
The American President Joe Biden will be in Poland today. He'll meet refugees who've escaped from Ukraine. At a series of meetings with NATO and European allies, the president talked about unity, staying the course, and red lines. What would NATO do if Moscow uses chemical weapons?
We would respond. We would respond if he uses it. The nature of the response would depend on the nature of the use.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has again asked NATO for more help, tanks and planes. But in an address posted overnight, he talked of peace and victory.
The country must move towards peace, move forward. With each day of our defence, we are bringing the peace we need so much closer. We're bringing victory closer. Because in this war, it is simply impossible for us not to win.
The Children's Hospital in Kyiv and a lucky escape. When a missile struck their house, Olga and her husband Dmytro ran to cover their baby daughter Victoria, protecting her from falling debris. As world leaders debate the course of this war, ordinary Ukrainians are on the front line, protecting each other. Graham Satchell, BBC News.
A range of stories on this morning's front pages. The Telegraph leads with President Biden's latest warning. If Russia uses chemical weapons in Ukraine, NATO will respond in kind. Of course, that part of the press conference during the Q&A. That leads The Guardian's front page too. They carry a photo of yesterday's G7 leaders in Brussels, one of various family photos taken, that one the easiest to fit on the front page, I guess, the others with higher level of attendance. The Times, too, follows suits, and just inside the front cover, a story from them saying that Her Majesty the Queen will attend Prince Philip's memorial service next week in person. The Metro's headline, "Kiss it goodbye." The stepdaughter of Russia's foreign minister becomes one of the latest Putin allies to be sanctioned by the UK government. The Mail says the Kremlin has labelled Boris Johnson its #1 enemy after he claimed Ukraine could actually win the war. Away from Ukraine, the FT leads with the boss of P&O Ferries admitting to MPs that last week's mass sackings were illegal, but he'd do it again to save the company. Also a deep dive on BP's history of involvement in Russia. Of course, they've recently exited their stakes in Russian oil giant Rosneft and just ridden the value down entirely.